This podcast is presented by the Prince George's County Memorial Library System.
Hi, I'm Heather.
And I'm Darlene.
And this is our podcast, These Books Made Me. Today we're going to be talking about The Secret of the Old Clock, the first volume in the Nancy Drew series written under the pseudonym Carolyn Keene. Friendly warning as always, this podcast contains spoilers. If you don't yet know who fell off a bridge, proceed with caution. We have a special guest this week. Could you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Andrea. I work for Prince George's County Memorial Library System at the New Carrollton branch. So, what did this book mean to you? Was this everyone's first time reading? And if not, how did this reread compare to your memories of reading it when you were younger?
Definitely not my first time reading it. I was addicted to the Nancy Drew books when I was a little kid. I probably read this when I was in first grade. I was obsessed with these books between first and third grade. And then in fourth grade, I switched to Agatha Christie because I really loved mystery books because of Nancy Drew. The most recent time I had reread this before now was when my eldest daughter was of an age that I started Nancy Drew, and I read it again thinking I'd give it to her to read. I was like, this is not very good.
Oh, no.
So that did not end up being the book that I gave to her, but they were on the shelves because I still have most of my copies from when I was a little kid. Reading it again is, they're not great literature at all, really. It is kind of funny on reread, though, because they're very dated, yes. And reading it through adult eyes is a trip. So yeah, I wouldn't say that I loved the book on reread, but the reread was funny to me. So it was worthwhile.
I think I had a similar progression from Nancy Drew books to Agatha Christie. I will say, because I really loved Nancy Drew, I withheld reading Sherlock Holmes books. I was like, Nancy Drew is the sleuth for me. Why do I want to read this male detective books? Yeah, similarly, I didn't read them till maybe I was in fourth or fifth grade. And yeah, they were just really easy reads and I devoured them. On reread, it was kind of difficult to get through, but for me, it was more so that everything just happens, fall into place for her. And I think that just made it kind of boring. It was so easy to just glaze over some things and do a really half-hearted speed read of it because it just felt like things were just going to fall into place for her. There was no real sense of danger,
There's
urgency,
no
or anything. Yeah.
I found these books when I was 9 in my grandfather's attic. They were my mother's books, and she'd read them. And I thought that this Nancy Drew was just something out of this world because, one, she was a girl solving mysteries. Two, she was a big girl because I was 9 when I found these books. So she was a big girl doing amazing things. And I, like the two of you, just went flying through all the books that were in the attic. My mother said, "Oh, I used to love those books." So I was tickled when we were talking about doing this because I was like, oh, I'm going to get to read some Nancy Drews again. And now they're so unbelievably dated to me. And I find myself as an adult picking, really? You said that? Seriously? You did that? Really? Which is not the way you should look at the books, but they aren't the best written things. But if you're 10, yeah, they're amazing.
It's a John Grisham or a Patterson for a little kid.
Absolutely. And there, I'd never read a mystery with a woman protagonist or a teenager protagonist who's doing all this cool stuff and figuring it out. But Darlene's right. She doesn't really get hurt. She gets locked in a closet. She gets out. She doesn't get, frustrated, really. She maintains her cool. And she's got a convertible, for God's sake. Everything works out great for her. So, but at 9, I'm telling you, I couldn't put them down. Couldn't put them down.
Yeah. I will say she's very resourceful. That was really cool to see as to read as a child. And I was just if I were to ever find myself locked in a closet, could I do the same thing? But
yeah, and she's pretty fearless. She has no problem approaching grown-ups in confrontational ways when she needs to. She really didn't hesitate to get herself into some sticky situations because she's very motivated by doing the right thing. And she feels like she has moral justification
for what she's doing. She comes up with great workarounds. When she couldn't get those keys back in the truck, she's like, you know what? I'll leave them here on the floor and they'll think they lost them. It was pretty good thought pattern on her part. So yeah.
I will attempt a quick plot summary of The Secret of the Old Clock. Nancy Drew, a vivacious 18-year-old sleuth, lives with her father, attorney Carson Drew, and their housekeeper, Hannah Gruen, in River Heights. While tooling around in her blue convertible, Nancy witnesses the near death of a small girl, Judy Turner, as a delivery van nearly runs her over and causes her to fall off the bridge. Returning Judy to her elderly aunts who are raising her reveals a mystery. They and other impoverished relations and friends had expected to be left money by their wealthy cousin, Josiah Crowley. But at his death, his will had been inexplicably changed to benefit the Tophams. Nancy is well acquainted with the Tophams, a snobbish nouveau riche family, because she attends school with their daughters, Ada and Isabel. Nancy sets about locating a second Crowley will to benefit the Turners, the Hoover sisters, a pair of elderly brothers, and Abby Rowan, an elderly and bedridden woman. In her quest to recover the will, Nancy encounters a gang of thieves, goes to summer camp, fights with the Tophams in a department store, gets locked in a closet, locates an Italian opera coach, and temporarily steals some evidence. Ultimately, Nancy succeeds in locating the true will in an old Crowley family clock, and all of the impoverished beneficiaries rejoice as the Tophams are rowed out of town on a rail.
So now I'm going to do the author bio. If you grew up with the Nancy Drew series, chances are the name Carolyn Keene sounds familiar to you, as the author credited on all the books. However, Carolyn Keene is a pseudonym for a slew of authors who have worked on the series since its start in 1930, the most notable of which is Mildred Benson, who is responsible for the formation of key aspects of Nancy's character that have made her a beloved character for 92 years. Benson, much like the famous heroine from the book she penned, was an independent adventurer with a resourceful spirit who has had jobs as an author, pilot, and journalist. She was born on July 10, 1905 in Ladora, Iowa. Despite growing up in a rural town with limited prospects for women, her parents encouraged her to get an education and pursue her dream of becoming a writer. In 1927, she became the first person to obtain a master's degree in journalism from University of Iowa's School of Journalism. Edward Stratemeyer, head of Stratemeyer Syndicate, was impressed with her writing and asked her to write for some established series. When it came time to realize his vision for a counterpart to the successful Hardy Boys series, Stratemeyer tasked Benson with writing the first volume for Nancy Drew. Benson, like other authors who have written for the Nancy Drew series, gave up her right to royalty payments on the series for a flat fee of $125 per book. She and the other authors were given briefs with an outline of the book's plot, characters' names, and other general information. They would then have to flesh out the book. Benson noted that her main concern was Nancy, trying to make her a departure from the stereotyped heroine commonly encountered in the series books of the day. Benson would go on to author 135 books, including 23 of the first 30 books in the Nancy Drew series. It should be noted that the series is not without a complicated history. In 1959, some of the first 34 Nancy Drew books were edited to remove racial stereotypes and to make the protagonist a softer, less impulsive and stubborn character. Nancy Drew is still a revered character to this day and is a fixture in pop culture as an eternally youthful sleuth.
Okay, so let's talk about The Secret of the Old Clock. How did this one hold up for you all? There's a lot dated in this.
Oh, it's just completely dated.
Yeah.
It's completely dated. Nancy's got a lot of clothes.
She does. She has a summer sweater suit.
She has a summer,
which is wild to me. Like, what even is that?
But I think it's very 1950s because when I was reading some of this stuff, I was thinking about things my mother used to wear or pictures of her in the early 60s. Yeah, summer sweaters. And she's got a convertible.
She got a blue convertible.
And she comes from a group of people who have, butlers and caretakers. It's evident, at least to me, that Hannah is kind of a surrogate mom for her, but she's the housekeeper. So she comes from a certain strata level that puts her in the position to be able to run around going in and out of other folks' houses and looking for stuff.
I mean, she straight up breaks into some places.
She breaks into she breaks in. And then she takes that clock.
She steals the clock.
And she keeps it.
And until she tells the like officer that's like giving her a ride, she's like, "Oh, by the way, I stole this clock."
Yeah, I stole this clock.
Okay.
And he's
But
like,
it was
what?
for a good reason.
Yeah. And nobody takes her to task for stuff like that. It's like, oh, okay. Because I don't actually think I could have done that.
No, she also seems to have endless amounts of like spending money on her at all times.
At all times.
So she goes to the department store and the Topham sisters. They're very rude to the sales clerk. Then they get into this petty tiff with Nancy there and end up destroying this dress.
A brand new dress.
Brand new off the rack dress. And they just leave. And so Nancy's like, "Oh, well, that's a shame. I don't want the like clerk to be on the hook for this. So I'll buy the dress. I just need a little discount and let's get it altered while I'm here." So she's buying this evening gown, I think.
Yes,
was
it
the
is. The evening gown.
Yeah.
Right.
So she does that. No biggie. Then later, she buys all these charity ball tickets off of her friend, which then cost $100 for
Which is a
the
lot.
Tophams to buy.
A lot of money.
So she was just carrying like enough cash to buy out her friend's tickets to use as a ploy later. She also had money to buy groceries for Abby.
Mhm.
She had money to go to the summer camp and she pays
She paid to stay there,
Helen.
didn't she?
What was the girl's name?
Helen is the girl that she goes with.
To the summer camp.
And then
so
Martha
it's Helen's aunt runs the camp or
And she
something.
paid her.
And she pays the aunt. "Oh, yeah, I decided to just swing by and stay here for a few days. Here's some cash." She seems to be carrying massive amounts of cash on her
She does.
at all times, which really doesn't hold up to now at all. That would be very foolish to do.
It really
And no one would do that. I don't know. I'm imagining this girl in a sweater set, like flashing Benjamins everywhere.
Sweater set, a skirt, and
Her
some flats.
convertible.
Yeah,
For
in her
sensible
convertible.
flats.
Right.
That's weird. And I think that that's definitely a product of the time for the book. Nobody would behave like that. Lots of the interactions she has with adults are very odd. And I'm not sure that that's a function of how old the book is.
Well,
But
now
she
also,
like stops by the judge's house and has lunch. And then she stops by
Yeah.
like the mayor and has lunch. She knows everybody. These adults treat her like she's an adult.
I think some of that, it appears to me, has to do with the fact she doesn't have a mom. So she rolls with her dad. And so she, he does that stuff, so she does it too. She doesn't fit a gender role, really. She honestly doesn't. She's not coy. She's upfront. We've already said she breaks into houses and takes what she wants. And I think she feels pretty much okay with that because she's acting, the parent that she has is male.
Yeah.
She has very male kinds of attitudes towards things or how she's going to go after something because a 1950s girl is not breaking into somebody's house. She's like, yeah, I got to go get this thing. I'm breaking in.
That's a really good point. And when I was reading it, again, it's been a long time since I read these books. I was surprised that Bess and George weren't in it because my memory of Nancy Drew is that she has her sidekicks, Bess and George. Well,
Right.
They apparently don't show up for another few books. And Helen was like going to originally be the sidekick, but I guess
Yes.
didn't pan
And
out.
then she goes away. She gets older and moves away.
And then gets replaced basically by
Yes.
Bess and George. Well, I didn't remember that. So I was surprised that Bess and George weren't there because you're right. Like they sort of are the different facet. George is the tomboy. Nancy is slick, put together one. Bess is the girly girl. Like
Right.
you have these roles. That's non-existent in this.
No.
The boyfriend that she gets later, Ned,
Mhm.
I was expecting him to be in this. Nope.
Nope.
So for the first book, like it's kind of great. There's really no like putting her in a box
Correct.
other than like all of the talk about like what she's wearing at various times. Yeah, her behavior is not gendered really at all.
It is not.
Yeah, and going off of what was said about her dad, I mean, she also benefits a lot from his reputation because there's a lot of times that people are just like, oh, you're just following in the steps of your father, which is a very, like, I guess, cavalier or just like dismissive way of just being like, this girl is like in several crime scenes, but that's okay. Like, she's just like her dad. She's just, trying to figure out like how to help people. And so she really benefits from that. But I also feel like sometimes that just gets treated too much as like a pass in some parts of the book. It's supposed to like explain away why she gets to like be there.
And it's completely unrealistic. But yeah, I think you're right. She gets treated like an extension of her dad and given the same sort of access and entree into society that he would have, which is interesting.
And he asked for her help.
Yeah.
He asked what she thinks. He thinks that we have figured out what the will is. I mean, there's no attorney doing that.
No, well, and he definitely is like egging her on to do these things that are borderline illegal and really quite dangerous. I don't know. Nancy's doing a lot of very fraught things at various times. There's, some of it is just like melodrama. It's supposed to give you this like, whoa, look, all these things are happening. Because we like open the book with a very small child almost getting
gets run over
killed by a
truck
and instead falling off of a bridge and suffering a head injury. And then Nancy, revives her and takes her back to the aunts. And we find out that the reason she lives with these elderly women is because her parents died in a boating explosion.
Accident.
Which this is the second character in a book that we've read for this show where the parents have died in a tragic boating accident. And I just, that's not a thing. Like,
That's not a thing.
no, but it apparently is in books of this time.
So part of my the first thing that I noticed when I started reading this was they tell you who Nancy is right up front. She's attractive.
Mm-hmm.
She's blonde. She's blue-eyed. And then the next thing that stuck out was she gets this kid off of the kid with the head injury. Did they call an ambulance?
No, and they're saying this girl lost consciousness. Her head is swelling up to where they're like, and no one does anything.
Nobody
they're just
calls
like,
anybody.
Oh, we'll get you a Band-Aid.
Yep.
It's like this child is like severely concussed and might have some kind of like subdural hematoma, and they've done nothing.
And then it says Nancy revives her. Really?
Yeah.
She fell off a bridge on her head? You didn't call anybody? Okay. All righty then. But I will say this. In the 50s, there was no 911.
Oh, okay.
You had to call the police.
But Nancy has a convertible. They
That's
could
right. She
go
does
to
have
the
a convertible.
hospital. Nope, we're going to stick an ice pack on it. She's fine.
Carried her in the room, put her
Yeah.
down, she'll be okay. Yeah.
Yeah, they would have had to flesh out the hospital scene, and then they would have had to do it again for what was the name of the other lady that she goes and visits? And
Abby.
she's
Abby.
yeah,
Who like has like a broken ankle that Nancy like gets some bandages and is like,
Yes.
you're fine now.
She's I'm telling you, she's got all kind of skill sets.
How does the defendant plead?
Speaking of some of the wild things that Nancy does related to Carson Drew, her dad, I was very struck by early on. So this was on page 17. The phrase Nancy had been taught never to gossip occurs, and it's immediately contradicted by Carson Drew gossiping about literally everyone.
Yes.
One day I was in the bank and Crowley came in and I heard a few words about a will.
Objection!
He tells her everything about everyone's business
Right.
all the time, even when they're his clients.
Which a good lawyer would never do.
Guilty.
Because that's
Who taught her never to gossip?
Right.
Hannah, the housekeeper? Because it wasn't her dad.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah. The attorney-client privilege issues in this
Are
book
killed.
are concerning, and we should discuss them.
They're obliterated. They're obliterated.
This session is adjourned.
Nancy eats very well. The one day when she first starts like her investigations, and he's like, "Oh, well, you can talk to Rolstead." She eats with them. She eats with another person and his wife,
Yes.
and then she eats with Allison when they have the birthday cake.
And the first thing she does when she gets out of the closet is go eat
Yeah,
because she was really hungry now.
girl works up an appetite. Let's talk about Nancy's sleuthing.
I feel like I just had to laugh. She seemed so cool when I was younger, and then now that I'm rereading it, a lot of it's just common sense, or it's just random things. I just feel like it's not real sleuthing.
Yeah,
I
there's
don't-
not really a mystery.
Yeah, it's just like she follows her hunches on certain things, yes. But yeah, there isn't like a true mystery. It feels like everyone kind of gives her the information and then she's just the person to follow through on it.
Right. Like Abby's like, there's a notebook
Yeah.
and a clock. So then she's like, hey, where's the clock? And then
the
she gets the
caretakers-
notebook, and the notebook's like, the will's in a safe deposit box. Here you go.
Right.
Like,
Because there's some notebook hanging inside of it after she busts it all open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was no real like sleuthing in the way that
there's
you
no
know,
cleverness to it.
yeah. And it was weird rereading it because I was like, I thought there was like a cleverness
Yeah.
to her sleuthing. Like I thought there was there was more to it. And then I think I was like a little disappointed. And this wasn't the only one I reread. I just like found some other ones at the library. And none of them was I like particularly impressed.
I don't know, but you're right. Like in this one, nothing clever happens. She does do some very dangerous things.
She does.
Like she has absolutely zero sense of self-preservation. She's constantly chasing armed thieves in her convertible. Then she's like breaking into their car, breaking into
the
home.
van, breaks into barns.
Yes, very. She goes out on a lake to like do reconnaissance on the house that she later breaks into.
The motor breaks down.
Yeah, she has very poor sense of self-preservation.
Yes.
I agree.
I thought she kept like, I thought it was just luck propelling her, which is never like fun. I think now that like you're older, you're just, whenever you read books or watch shows or movies, if it's just luck that gets them out of it, it feels very like boring. It feels like there were no stakes. It was just their luck. Because they're the protagonist, they're going to get out of this.
Well, and I am curious because Andrea, you actually read the original version. And it says that the versions that we read, they had toned down her like impulsivity and like recklessness.
Right. Because
what did she do that was more reckless and impulsive than chasing the like thief gang?
Well, so the thieves were drank a lot. And she was, pretty much going up almost toe to toe with a bunch of drunk guys. But she was also, the thing that I didn't see in this book and I kind of remembered in my head was she was kind of MacGyver-y. She was good at taking things and getting out of stuff and moving things around, which as a 10-year-old, I thought she was a better Encyclopedia Brown, who I adored.
Me too.
But when I read this, I was like, no, she's not MacGyver-y in here. I mean, she tries to get out of the closet.
She does get out of the closet, I guess.
Well, she doesn't, but the caretaker lets her out because she's got that rod.
Yeah, because she's like levered it part way.
And then he finds the key in his back pocket and he lets her out. But I thought in the first one, she got out of the closet on her own. So her impulsivism was, I'm just going to go do this right now. There was no actual prior thought, just, I'm going to go do this now. But
she never really has a plan.
No.
In this. It's just like she sees something, which again, it's why it's like strange to me that it's saying they made her, this is the less impulsive version, because she really has no plan at any point. She's just like, okay, I see this. I need this thing, so I'm going to do it.
Right. And she's also 16 in the first book. So she's really being 16 years old. And, I'm going to go do this thing and whatever happens kind of thing. But I'm strong, I'm healthy. And so I'll get out of it kind of thing.
Yeah, I could see the part where it said that they made her character a little softer because I feel like there's a lot of times that she takes the like moral high ground in the book. But the Tophams, like she's not quite as like biting in her remarks about them. I mean, like she obviously doesn't want them to succeed, but it's more so the emphasis is placed on her trying to help all these other people that would stand to really benefit from the money. And yeah, just like every time she like meets one of them, it's supposed to showcase like some like wonderful aspect of her character and just like how inviting she is, how like immediately nice she is and like helpful and like willing to go to bat for people that she only just met like a few minutes ago.
Yeah, she's girl white knighting it, right? Like everyone she meets, she saves.
Yeah.
Like, it's an old person, I saved them. It's a baby, I saved them.
Right.
It's,
in the first book, it really is a high school kind of a rivalry thing, the kids with a lot of money versus I'm doing okay, but my dad scrapes, he works hard for it and I'm hard scrabble. And I think you guys are, horrible. And I'm real glad to see you get a comeuppance. It's more of a class issue than what Darlene was talking about with her being helpful. She wants to see someone's downfall in the 1930 book.
And I do think at the end of the book that Schadenfreude aspect sort of stays there because they talk about like they had to move into a smaller house.
Yeah, they did.
And now they're going to have to work. And she's just kind of like, maybe it'll be good for them.
Yeah, that is the end of
There
the
is a
book.
little bit of like pettiness at the end.
Yeah.
Because it's really not established what the girls have done other than just like they're bratty, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Like they weren't robbing these people. It was definitely their parents that had done
Right.
this. But yeah, Nancy seems very thrilled with their downfall. Let's talk a little bit about the gender roles in the book. We touched on it a bit that Nancy herself is not particularly gendered, but I don't know that that applies to the other characters in the book very well, because I do think we get a lot of sort of stereotypical, and I'm sure it was of the time, the housekeeper's a woman.
Mhm.
The two destitute elderly aunts are very like feminine and they're just doing their best and they're kind of helpless and not put together. The two sisters are also just doing their best, but you know, they're very like
Doty kind of.
they don't really have any kind of like real agency in their own lives, it doesn't seem like.
Right. And if they don't get this money, they're all going to be living on their porches or something.
Yeah. And like all of the people that we see in any kind of positions of authority are all men. You know,
Right.
Carson Drew, the judge, the Topham guy who's, you know, the brains behind this, even the dead guy, like
Yeah, Crowley.
Right.
anyone with means and like any sort of actual authority seems to be male. Even the two brothers that are like the cousins that are the
Yes.
farmers,
Right.
they're shown in a more like prestigious way than the like other destitute relatives.
Yes.
They just want to travel.
Yeah, they just want to do something extra, but they're getting by just fine. But none of the women are.
Right.
Abby is literally like, I've fallen and I can't get up, lady.
I've fallen
She is.
and I can't get up.
It's just like, poor me, I just have this pension. I can't even feed myself. It's like, it's not great from a other than Nancy perspective in terms of, I think, how gender comes through in the book.
Interestingly, even for Nancy, though, I feel like sometimes a lot of things she got away with was because she was a woman. There were certain allowances that people gave her because she's, and I don't know if that's always present as much in this book. Maybe I'm thinking of like the other ones I reread, because I reread the one after this, The Hidden Staircase, and I forgot there was another one. But I just felt like oftentimes when she would be talking to people, they would just give her allowances because she was a woman. Like they didn't think that she was gonna like be the one to like solve the mystery, or if she found herself in a place she shouldn't be, they kind of just really dismissed it because like what exactly was she gonna do?
Yeah, that's true.
So there is like a sort of benefit to it, but I do agree that for the most part, she's not very gendered in this book.
Mm-mm. She's not. But she does get away with stuff. And people don't really question her because she goes to that summer camp because she wants to get in a boat so she can go over there to that cottage. And she keeps asking these questions. And finally, Helen says, you seem to really, want to know something about it. She's like, nah, just, want to know where it was. And they let it go.
Yeah.
They just let it go. So then when you're on the lake all day in the boat and you just went out there all day and you greasy too, what's wrong with you? Oh, well, the motor didn't work, but there's no follow up to
why you even took it out in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, and the cops don't even ask her.
Yeah.
Like, why did you break into that house and encounter the thieves that put you in the closet in the first place? When she did have the encounter with the thieves in the house, I kind of initially thought they were treating her, I guess, a little bit more gently because she was a girl. But really, they hadn't done anything different to Tucker. They
That's
just
true.
shoved
That's
him in
true.
a closet.
shoved him in the
too.
closet too.
But I mean, they knew that they shoved him in a closet and that it was very likely that no one was going to come
He was gonna
for
die
him.
in
Yeah,
the
that he was going to
closet.
die. But then later they're saying like, oh, we're going to get in so much trouble. And what's the head guy's name? Sal?
Sid.
They were like getting angry with him and saying that like he did the most wrong by like locking Nancy up. Like they didn't talk about
The
Jeff at all.
caretaker.
No.
Yeah.
But it was like the fact that she might die, that's what's like really bad about this.
I mean, in fairness, that probably would have gotten them in a lot more trouble than the caretaker
Yeah.
guy, because it's not like the Tophams cared about that dude.
Right.
But like, if you killed the daughter of the like prominent town attorney that like pals around with judges and
Well,
mayors,
Yeah, I don't think they knew that of her, but still, yes, her death, if it were to be tied to them, would be a much bigger deal, especially now that we have context that Jeff in the original version of this book was Black. He was not white.
Right. The caregiver in the first book was Black, and his character was somewhat childlike. If you'd seen a picture of him, he probably was shuffling. He gets drunk because the robbers get him drunk, and his spoken parts are in dialect, which was indicative of literature written in the 30s. And so when they rewrote the book, he became tall, thin, and white. The town has no diversity. The diversity would be based on class, not on race. And they took the alcohol out. And so it's kind of interesting because that book was written in 1930 and Prohibition had started. So for them to get drunk, that was also part of the crime, was the fact that they were also drinking illegal alcohol. And then, of course, the Black caretaker is going to want some, so they give some to him too. And then they lock him in the closet. So he's a mess. And no one believes him. So she says she takes him with her. Nancy takes him with her to the police because we have to report this robbery. And he tries to get sober by putting a hose on his face, and she gets annoyed with him. You know, she's in the first book, she's very curt, she's very short. And she wants him to just come on because we have to go do this thing. And when he's telling the story, the police think he's one of the robbers. You know, he's still kind of drunk. And so everything he says, she has to back it up. She has to back it up. So that came out in the 1959 version. And so everyone in the book is Caucasian. And once again, the only diversity would be a class kind of a diversity. So you've got poor people and you've got people with means.
It's interesting, too. Where do we think this town is?
Where in the world is?
I don't know. Is it in New York?
I have no idea. I was thinking it was maybe like vaguely Midwestern.
I really like cold.
Oh, interesting. Because I was thinking like New England, like that.
That would work,
general.
too. I mean, it definitely has the like small town vibe, but small town for mostly rich people and then some farmers.
In my head, I see the Finger Lakes region. It's got this lake. There's a lot of trees, but there's also farms. So I kept thinking, maybe New York, upstate New York, someplace like that.
That makes sense.
It could easily be upstate Michigan too.
Yeah, I think I maybe was thinking like Midwestern just because of the overwhelming whiteness of the setting. But
Well, because I think maybe it's because before I reread this one, because I think I had this on hold, I got a hold of the witch tree symbol. And she goes to like Amish town around.
Interesting.
She's like near the Amish.
That could also still be Midwest, though. Like when I lived in Champaign, the towns that are near Champaign, Illinois, there's
that's true.
lots of Amish population there.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a good sized Amish population on the western side of Michigan. So it could still be Midwest,
Yeah.
Or it could be Maryland.
Yeah, or Pennsylvania.
Southern Maryland, Pennsylvania. Yeah.
I may have also conflated it with Millie Benson having spent time in like Iowa. So I may have just kind of had that bleed over. Because I don't remember when I was a kid that I was ever like, where does Nancy live? Like, you don't care. It's just, she lives in River Heights. I think we touched on this a little bit at the beginning when we were talking about our rereads and the first time we read it. But why did Nancy resonate for the two of you?
I think it was just really fun and interesting to see like a female character, especially one that was so young. So therefore like a little closer in age to you as when you're reading it. I think it was just really like interesting, fun, new and exciting. It's the kind of character that you wish you were a lot like the kind of person that you would like fantasize like, oh, like maybe if I were in any of these situations, like would I get out? And like, I think it's so like interesting that she does. And she helps so many people along the way. And she's always the one. Yes, I was saying a lot about her sleuthing not being so great. But one thing that she will do is she'll get to the bottom of something. Like she will see it through to the end. And I think that that's probably a characteristic of hers that's very admirable.
She's smart. She's quick on her feet. She does not back down. And for a 9-year-old that was really, really like an amazing thing to see. Because before I found those books, I've been reading stuff like The Borrowers, Encyclopedia Brown, a lot of stuff by Beverly Cleary, which really just didn't even, it was easy to read, but the stories were so easy and gentle. And here's somebody in the mix. And at 9, I wasn't looking at it with a critical eye. She was doing some stuff. And I think that if you gave this to a 9-year-old now, I think that 9-year-old would probably think the same way. Here's a big girl getting it done. And it was really my first foray into serious mysteries, actual mysteries. I mean, I think that's why she resonated.
Yeah, that's true. Because I almost was going to say, but I think 9-year-olds now have more characters to choose from.
They do.
But yeah, I think that even for that age group, she's still very palatable. It's not so above that audience level that it's just really easy. It's just really easy to consume, and then also to just see the admirable qualities in her. But again, it's not going to be something that's so complex that someone's not going to get it. Right. So I think that's why it's still, I would see why she's still an enduring character.
She has tenacity. She goes on adventures. They're very much the American Girl books that we did. We talked a little bit about how most of them weren't particularly well written. They were very, very plotty. They're very implausible. These kids, it's where are the parents? Where are the adults in this situation? This is slightly more plausible because she's older. She has a car, that gives you a lot more, mobility in terms of the kinds of adventures that you can have. And she does it all while being perfectly put together, and everyone admires Nancy. Literally everyone that she encounters is Nancy, you're the greatest. They're very dated. But at the same time, I still kind of get it because we go very young with these. They're chapter books.
Right.
I think it's meant younger. I think it's really meant for a 3rd grader that reads pretty well, or even a 2nd grader that reads well and wants something that isn't the soft story about a mouse or, story about a child their age. They want a little bit more grit to it. They want something exciting, scary. And they want a girl doing it and not a boy.
And what's kind of interesting, too, is she's 16 or 18, depending on which version you read.
She's blonde or a redhead.
Right. But these books were not written for the age group that she is.
Right.
They were not written for 18-year-olds. There's no 18-year-old that's going to read this and just, I can't wait to read that.
No, and I can't imagine that when these were contemporary, that anyone that age was reading them.
I don't think. No, my mother was 10.
Yeah. And that was the impression I got from my mom, too, was she started me on them early because she had them as a girl. And she admired Nancy when she was a voracious little reader like me. And so, there is something resonant about sharing something cross-generationally with a book as well. Because you and I both had that experience, getting it from somebody older than us that enjoyed it when they were a child and put it into your hands. And I remember the anticipation of getting to go to B. Dalton bookstore and
B. Dalton
pick out a Nancy Drew. We didn't have a lot of money, so that was a huge treat when I got to actually buy a book and not get it from the library.
Right.
And I was so proud of my yellow spined collection lined up all perfect on my shelf. And to me, that was really a mark of the kind of person I was and the kind of reader I was and what I could do. And so I don't know. I do think that it still maybe works, and they do check out still. They still circulate. So they are working for kids still. In a way that just reading it, you're kind of this is not good, but it's not meant for us.
I just recommended it last week to a lady who was I've got a 4th grader that reads well, likes mysteries. Let me introduce you to Nancy Drew.
Well, and how many books did you tear through after Nancy Drew? We talked about Agatha Christie, but there were certainly things that I read at the time that were just mimicking Nancy Drew. The Trixie Belden books.
Oh, yeah.
The Meg books.
I was too old for those. I went to Sherlock Holmes after this.
Yeah.
And he was
we all graduated.
Yeah, he was harder. And then behind that, Agatha Christie, which I couldn't get enough Agatha Christie.
Me either.
It wasn't possible.
I did the same thing. She was my more grown version of Nancy Drew. I went to every used bookstore. I would get every title I could, buy it for myself. My friend and I made a trivia game about Agatha Christie. And again, it was very aspirational for me. That said something about me that was important.
Miss Marple means a lot to me now.
Miss Marple means a lot to me now too. She did then as well.
She
But
means a lot to me now. But yeah, she was my first foray into mysteries, which I like mysteries. But I don't, as dated as they are, I don't see any reason not to introduce them to a voracious young reader who's looking for something different from The Borrowers, which, by the way, was a good book. But, after a while, those little people under the floor, it's time to move on to something else. And this was a great way to move on.
it does make me curious now, to talk the next time I see a kid taking one of these, to talk to them and just ask them about it.
I think the general story is still really good. We're able, because we're grown, to pick out a lot of those things and go, well, yeah, you wouldn't do this, you wouldn't do that. But if you're 9, you're not paying attention to any of that.
Yeah.
You're just reading and you're having a ball.
Yeah, I think the foundation is there. I think that if a kid comes in, oftentimes, I'll still recommend Nancy Drew, but I'll mostly recommend the graphic novels because I thought they were pretty good. I thought they were pretty good for a graphic novel. And to if a kid's not really interested in reading, I always recommend a graphic novel so that they at least start to build up a love of reading. And I don't know, I think it's still held up well. They definitely modernized it, but those key characteristics are still there. So then you're still introducing a new generation to, the idea of Nancy Drew. And if they wanted to go back and kind of see the history of that character, then they can go and check out these books. Interestingly enough, though, the person that I feel has been checking them a lot out, at least from the Beltsville Library, has been an older customer.
Interesting.
And
it's a nostalgia thing.
Yeah, it was a nostalgia thing. And she wanted to read them again, in order.
Yeah. And I will say that oftentimes when I've given the book to somebody, it's been a kid accompanied by an adult. And same with Encyclopedia Brown. That is usually a series that a kid is not independently asking for. It's because they came in with their dad and their dad is like, hey, my son, I think would really like these books. Do you have any of these? I read them when I was a kid. I guess one of my worries is there's zero representation of anyone who's not white in this book at all. So I don't know that I love that. And I do think, we did Westingame for the podcast. And that's a mystery that I would have no hesitance putting into a kid's hand because there is representation in the book, even though it's an old book. It's a 50-year-old book.
Well, maybe you give it and something else so that they get kind of a back and a forth. But I think they have value in that it is a strong female protagonist. You can't take that away from it. And she is bright. And she does make some really good common sense kinds of moves. And there's nothing wrong with learning that. And if the person's parent is involved now, because Heather, I know you would be this person, you would say to Peanut, you know what? I just want you to know that this is not how things are now. It's a great story, but this is not how things are now. I'll tell you, the other day with my mom, we were watching something called How to Steal a Million, 1966 movie that starred Peter O'Toole and Audrey Hepburn. And I sat there and picked that movie apart because there were so many things in that movie that were so wrong. But it was 1966 and nobody paid it any attention. He assaults this woman on more than one occasion. But because he's a man, she swoons instead of saying, what are you doing? Get off me. You don't get to just kiss me like that. But in 1966, that was, she was swooning because he was such a nice looking man when he was being a bonehead. That's where I think an adult eye comes in and says, okay, this is a great story, but let's not forget these things because you're not going to see this now. And that means that parents are paying attention to what their children are reading, which some parents do. And some parents are just glad they got a book.
Well, and on saying that, I do also think that, at least for me, this was one of my early introductions to serialized storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And so following the same character throughout. I mean, I think Ramona was probably another one that,
Right.
going back to Beverly Cleary, where there were multiple Ramona books. But this sort of episodic serialized book, it does not matter if you read the first Nancy Drew book. You can start at number 50 and you'll be fine. Seeing how something's structured like that, I think there is some value in terms of maturing as a reader, because you see what devices they use every time. Like, you're always going to get this description of Nancy in the first chapter. You're always going to get this type of plot element is going to happen for it to be a Nancy Drew. And I think maybe there's some value in that. There aren't a ton of books for this young that are serialized but episodic like that. There's Babysitter's Club. Like, yes, we have like the J series books, but a lot of those aim very low for the kids. Like, it's all about fairies. It's all about puppies that have these magic powers.
That's true.
It's very childlike, right? This feels more mature.
I think you're right.
I don't know. I'm trying to come to bat for you, Nancy.
Understand plot a little bit differently, and what a real protagonist is like, maybe more so than the Bernstein Bears or something like that. Because I agree. I think a lot of the children's books, especially if a kid is a really good reader, are just dumbed down.
Yeah. And
they don't need to be.
And they take things, there is no sense of danger. I mean, for us as adults, there's no sense of danger in this. We know Nancy's not going to get murdered because the book won't finish. But when you're a kid, the first time you read a book like that, there's real peril there. You haven't learned that, well, of course she survives through the next book.
Because she's in 50 more books.
Yeah. And like having like true bad guys, like the bad guys in this are actual bad guys.
They
like,
are.
You have criminals, and then you have like the white collar criminal. There's legit bad guys in this, even if they don't make sense, because that thievery ring. Like,
oh yeah, that was a side plot, I guess.
Yeah, what is happening? Because I thought initially, I was like, well, surely they're doing this at the behest of the Tophams. They're looking for this clock, or
they were their own deal.
They were just running their own thievery racket, but like chose to rip off two old ladies that we're told are poor.
Right.
Why? Like, you get the summer cottage thing. Great. Go rob the rich people. Why are you robbing those two poor old ladies? That was bizarre.
Yeah.
But it's a legit bad guy, right? Like, it's a bad guy with teeth. And you don't have that in between fairy tales where you get a monster bad guy most of the time, or the evil stepmom. Then you have that long period of childhood where we don't really do bad guys because it's too scary. Right. You'll get bad guys when you hit 5th grade kind of thing. This gives you bad guys. So like you have much more of an antagonist that's scary. There's actual plot to this. It's not just like, I don't know, maybe there's value in that. It made us able to read much more mature.
Yes. And a lot of it.
Mystery fiction.
And it was a jumping off point too.
Yeah.
To some other things. So
yeah, I think it's kind of doing something.
Each episode, we are heading into the library and talking to you. Well, not you, but people like you right here in the stacks. Today, we want to know, who is your favorite fictional detective?
Sherlock Holmes. I love him. I don't know. I'm intrigued with the character, no matter who plays it, but I especially like Robert Downey Jr. in it. I think it's just his... Is it quirkiness to the character that he brings? And he always solves it. And the fact that we would overlook things that he sees. So that's my why.
My favorite detective of all time is Columbo, because he came across as such a bumbling idiot and he was so smart. And then he would be like, just one more thing. And it would be like, I'm taking you down with this. It was amazing. It was great.
My favorite detective in a book, I forgot what the book is called, but it's about this guy as a banana. He trying to solve crimes.
On TV, Detective Columbo.
My favorite detective is Inspector Zenigata from the anime series Lupin the Third. I like that he's sort of a bumbling buffoon who's still really good at his job. So he's my favorite detective.
One of my favorites, and I will not commit to an absolute favorite, is Lord Peter Wimsey.
I'm trying to think of any. I like a lot of them, but I don't,
Also, Susan Ryland from the more recent series of Magpie Murders, just aired on PBS.
I guess my favorite fictional detective would be Adrian Monk. He's really interesting. He's able to do all this stuff even though he has some mental health issues, and I think that's pretty cool.
I have a sweet spot for Magnum PI, the old version, Tom Selleck, and his buddy TC, but he's not really a detective, so.
Now let's talk to someone who actually knows something about one of the main topics covered in this book, lawyers.
All rise.
So, Andrea, you are an attorney.
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask for your impressions on Carson Drew as an attorney in this book.
So Carson Drew doesn't seem to understand attorney-client privilege at all. He talks about anything with his kid, and that's completely out of control. The whole point to client-attorney privilege is that you can say these things. Yes, I murdered the woman next door, and you don't tell anybody that. Because you need to keep that to yourself so that you can build the case that you need to build. And you can't trust somebody else, not even your child, who you think is exceptional, with that kind of information. Basically you can lose your license behind stuff like that. So he does whatever. And he uses his kid really to help him to do these things that he shouldn't be using his kid to do. So he's an attorney in name.
Well, I also wanted to ask about the potential conflict of interest because Nancy uncovers this will, and it is at least somewhat based on Carson telling her that he overheard the man's attorney talking to him about a will.
Right.
And then that being confirmed by that attorney and the judge that there was talk of a will and there might be a second will. Nancy finds the will, at which point Carson Drew is then hired by the executors of the will, which is the bank.
Yeah, that's seriously attorney. That's definitely a conflict of interest.
Yeah, that seemed very dicey to me.
Yeah, it was funny how that happened all at the end.
It made the story go all together. But they would never have done that with him, especially because there were too many things going on with him having his kid find a will. Basically she steals a clock to find the thing that takes them to the will. Now the will itself was fine because if you can rewrite your will. So that part was fine, but how they got to it and who was doing what they were doing with it, he should never have been involved in that. So yeah, it was a conflict of interest.
Would the Tophams have had any case to overturn that will?
No, the will stood alone. So you can rewrite your will until your last breath.
So there's no fruits of a poison tree issue with the will being discovered through dodgy tactics.
By an 18.
I mean, it needed to be found, but it was dated March. It was obviously done by someone who was he was sick, but he was of sane mind, and he also made it known to somebody that there was another will that had these things in there. I'm going to take care of all the poor people in town with this will. So the will itself stood. And so all they had to do was prove that he'd written it. And in
they did a handwriting comparison at the bank.
Right. They did a handwriting comparison. That's what you would have done.
Okay.
And so the will would stand. So the will was going to do its own thing no matter what. They could contest it. The date wasn't going to allow them to win. So the will was going to stand on its own. The finding of it was dicey.
Well, thank you very much for your legal expertise.
But yeah, that's so funny because I was thinking like how different the reread was because as a child, I didn't care. And then now I'm just like, all you're saying is that Crowley like knew how to write a will, but what does that mean? Like I kept having these questions and I wanted them to answer it, but I'm like, of course it's not going to delve into that because that's not the point. The point is that she found the will, it stands, and these people are now going to get their money.
I was just like, the Tophams are going to get Carson Drew disbarred after this. Like,
well, I mean, they could have gone after him for some other things, but not for the will.
But the will would have been fine.
Right.
We are going to take a BuzzFeed quiz today asking, which character from the Nancy Drew universe are you? Interesting to note that this quiz was written by someone named Mildred.
Cool.
Probably not Mildred Benson because I believe she's deceased, but maybe it's an homage to her. You are out camping when suddenly someone is bitten by a snake. You were probably the one bitten by the snake. Sterilize your pocket knife and make 2 quick cuts at the bite to let the poison drain off. Faint, regardless of whether you were the one bitten by a snake. I went camping. Are you sure?
Okay. I don't like snakes.
Are you fainting?
Yeah.
I'm probably fainting.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that I would be that resourceful in that situation. How do you sterilize your pocket knife? Is it
fire?
Okay. So you just
or
had
booze if you have booze with you.
Yeah, if you have booze, that's true.
One or the other. But I don't think that this is actually what you would want to do if you were bitten by a snake. Like, there's no way that that's going to go well. And now you're just like moving
Whacking
the venom
holes in
around
your
and
leg.
opening up wounds.
Yeah,
So, no, you should just go to a hospital.
It's not one of the options.
Get the antivenom. So I guess I'm bitten by the snake because I'm not doing this with my knife because that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I'll go with faint. Although it reminds me of the fact that for the longest time, and I think it was because of pop culture, didn't people used to think you're supposed to like suck the poison out?
Suck the venom out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have no problems with snakes. So I guess, I mean, I pick snakes up when I find them. So I probably got bitten. I would not pick up a venomous snake though. So I guess I like stepped on something terrible. There's a man who won't stop following you around. He is probably trying to keep you from meddling in his criminal enterprise, desperately in love with you, lost, or about to get a rude awakening.
I think I'm going for trying to keep you from meddling in his criminal enterprise. I think I'd make up some sort of story like that in my head.
Yeah, I'm thinking somebody needs a restraining order. I think it's criminal enterprise too.
Yeah, I think so too. Though I'm sort of tempted by about to get a rude awakening. Maybe I'll go with that one just to. A mysterious clerk at a perfume counter seems unwilling to sell you a particular scent. You keep pushing until she lets you buy it. It smells amazing on you. Why am I at a perfume counter? Ask why she's so reluctant to sell it to you. Walk away. Perfume is expensive anyways.
Why are you so reluctant to sell it?
Yeah.
Same. Like, lady, you are a salesperson. Why will you not let me buy this?
They actually like push it on you. Because I remember there was this one lady that's like, you're really going to love this one. And I was like, I'm so certain I won't. And she still took my wrist,
and
put it on.
You.
Yeah. And then I was like nauseous the rest of the day because I don't really like fruity perfumes like that. I was pretty mad that day.
Before I had my coughing attack, I would say, why are you not going to sell this to me?
Yeah, it's bizarre behavior.
It is.
The ghost of a young woman is said to haunt the inn that you're staying in, waiting for her long-lost fiancé. That's romantic, nonsense, suspicious, spooky.
You can't say two answers, can you?
No.
Well, then I'll go with romantic.
My first inclination was nonsense.
Yeah, that would be mine as well. I would like the ghost. Like, I think that would be cool.
Yeah.
To stay in the haunted inn, but yeah.
I would also just be like, move on. There's peace at the end, right?
Okay. People who don't like you might say that you never met a sandwich you didn't like, are so blunt that it's rude, can't keep your nose out of other people's business, have your head in the clouds.
I don't think these are any of like misjudgments that anyone has had about me.
I guess I'm going to say can't keep your nose out of other people's business.
I think mine is going to be too blunt.
For me, I think it's also can't keep your nose out of other people's business. Probably, I don't know. I just ask a lot of questions, and it's not because I'm trying to be in people's business. I think that's just how I
think I know a lot about other people's business because people just tell me things.
They tell you.
But that would definitely, to people that don't like me, appear like I am meddling or something. People who do like you tend to describe you as clever, kind, loyal, brave.
Loyal.
I'm kind of stuck. I think maybe. Can we come back to me?
Yeah, I'll go brave. I think I'm like full Gryffindor on this one. So
Gryffindor.
People who do like me see me as maybe loyal.
After a busy morning of investigating a mystery, you definitely need a break for a shower and a fresh set of clothes, a chance to check in with your friends, a Sunday. You don't need a break. I don't need a break.
Yeah, I don't need a break.
Especially if I'm doing a mystery. Like, I just want to keep going.
Sorry. So let's see. I feel like, yeah, I don't need a break. Because you're right. If it is a mystery, I'm going to want to like continue it till the end.
I'd be invested at that point. Like, I want to keep going. Okay. You can't stand hours and hours of shopping, indecisive people, more than 3 hours without food, injustice.
Indecisive people.
I think I'm good with injustice.
I think I will too. But actually, I don't like any of these things.
Yeah, I feel like the older I've gotten, I don't really care for shopping as much.
Yeah, not my jam.
I don't.
And hours of it sounds horrible.
Yeah.
And I hate not eating. So those are all bad.
Yeah, I'm always like snacking on something.
But like, I feel like they also pale in comparison to injustice.
Yeah.
Like me being hangry or injustice, I probably should go with injustice.
Yeah.
Honestly, one of the best days of your life was, the day you realized you were falling in love with your partner, the day you really kicked ass at your job and got that promotion. You can't pick one. All the golden days that blur together from growing up with your best friends, or the day that you realized something you worked really hard on truly helped someone else more than you ever knew before.
That would be mine.
Yeah, I think the last one for me too.
Yeah, agree. All right. Who'd everybody get?
Nancy Drew.
Nancy Drew.
We're all Nancy. Yes, you are the queen herself, the undisputed super sleuth and the kick-ass detective. You're clever, resourceful, assertive, and classy AF. You have zero time for anyone's ish. Your hair is as impeccable as your manners, but you're not afraid to get dirty to get the job done. You have a habit of being suspicious of new people, including your steady boyfriend, Ned. When you first met him, you assumed he was stealing your car. But deep down, you just want what's best for the people you love. You'll do anything to make that happen, even if it means getting locked up and left to die in an abandoned summer bungalow. Don't worry, you'll escape. You win, Nancy. Yay us.
Oh, yay.
Yes.
That was nice after getting Mr. Bennett.
Yes, I know. That was really a downer.
Yeah, it really
Especially
was.
since we really hated Mr. Bennett.
Yeah.
It's rough stuff.
Each episode, we ask whether our book passes the Bechdel test. The Bechdel test asks whether a work features two female characters who talk to each other about something that doesn't involve men or boys. So does it pass?
Yes.
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 She definitely talks to the Turners about Judy's tragic boating accident, dead parents, and Judy's upbringing. She talks to the sisters about Allison getting voice lessons. She talks to Abby Rowan about how she has no food.
She talks to Helen and goes to the
camp.
summer camp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In fact, she really doesn't talk about
No.
boys or men at all.
I mean, I guess she
really?
talks about the will a lot, and it's Josiah Crowley's, but no, mostly she's not talking about guys.
Mm-mm.
And Ned's not in this book, so no
Yeah.
boy
I was
to
gonna
talk
say,
about.
yeah. I was like, there's no romantic interest.
There's no love
so-
interest at all.
Mm-mm.
All right, well, that's it for this episode of These Books Made Me. Join us next time when we'll discuss a book in which it's a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. If you think you know which book we're tackling next, drop us a tweet. We're at PGCMLS on Twitter and hashtag These Books Made Me.